our first session at the symposium, I'd like to welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. Curtis McGrath OAM. I'll tell you a little bit about Curtis. He served in the Australian Army as a combat engineer for 6 years, where he served with honour in East Timor, Indonesia and Afghanistan. On the 23rd of August 2012, Curtis was on patrol when he stepped on an improvised explosive device, an IED, which detonated beneath him, taking out both his legs. Only 20 minutes after the explosion, Curtis famously said, "You will see me in the Paralympics." Since losing his legs, Curtis has not looked back. 18 months after that fateful day, Curtis was crowned world champion at the World Sprint Canoe Championships held in Moscow in Russia. This started his path to the Paralympics. The title of Curtis' presentation is Triumph Over Tragedy. Would you please welcome Curtis McGrath.
Thank you, Nicole, for your welcome to country. It's quite nice, and we often tell stories about our past in order to learn and move forward. And I think that's very ever present in the words with the Nungalinga man. But first, I want to go back to where I grew up. I'm a Kiwi. Don't hold that against me. Don't blame the ref. Don't blame me for the ref's decision last night. It was, in my opinion, a Wallabies win, but nonetheless, we'll take it. I did grow up in New Zealand, had an amazing lifestyle, grew up as a very active kid, had lots of opportunities in the outdoors, kayaking and cricket in the summer, and snowboarding and playing rugby in the winter. And as we all get asked when we leave school what we want to do with ourselves, and a lot of my friends were heading off to university, and I wanted to continue on with the adventure. And luckily enough for me, I could become an Australian soldier with my dual citizenship. Not yet can become an Australian politician, but I came over and enlisted in Brisbane on the 12th of June 2006 as a combat engineer. And some of you would know the official role of a combat engineer, and those who don't, is to provide mobility and deny mobility. And this is clearly displayed with this picture. We can dig the trench to stop the tank, and it's surprising how many tank commanders would go through it. But we can also build the bridge to allow it to pass over. As well as that, we do a number of other roles, water purification, construction, demolition, search, chemical warfare, and a number of other things. So very broad role. And it was, exciting. We got an opportunity to travel over to, humanitarian missions, East Timor, and I really enjoyed the East Timor deployment. I felt like we made a really big difference to the people of East Timor, and we always felt very, very welcome when we were there. And also, we got an opportunity to head over to Indonesia to Op Padang assist when they had an earthquake and needed to make some water out of the seawater. It was pretty amazing technology because it was these new systems. Don't remember the acronym, so forgive me. It's been a while. But at the same time, always going out there and helping people and helping the surroundings and helping the community, I think, was the main thing. And should tell a little story about where I ended up in the army. And I remember at one CER, I was at knockoff parade one afternoon in 2009, and my boss comes out and we did the knockoff parade, and he said, "Oh, who wants a posting to Brisbane?" And I was like, "Far out, this sounds like a motorbike course. I'll do it." And nothing really happened, which I thought was quite strange. And then 2 weeks later, I got a posting order to Brisbane. So I was like, yeah, I'm out of here. So it was a rather interesting way for that to happen. Just put your hand up and you get stabbed. But it wasn't a stabbing. It was a sort of a reward, I thought, which was nice. But in the end, I sort of continued on with that humanitarian side of things. We did an ACAP in 2010 in Pukaja, which is way down on the border of South Australia, New South Wales, in NT. And we're always doing, the combat side of things. And, when I posted down to Brisbane, one CER, I got the opportunity to head over to Afghanistan. And a lot of my friends were on that deployment and, doing that combat role, which we all were training to do all the time. But a lot of us never really get the opportunity to do it. And in 2011, I decided to take 4 months leave without pay because I was a little bit sort of tired of the labouring side of our role, and which I felt like I was doing too much of, and wanted to to think about what I was doing. So I took 4 months leave without pay, went over to Europe, went on a Kentucky tour, didn't drink anything, it was great. But I also went to New Zealand and watched the All Blacks win the World Cup, and that was a really amazing time. But on the first day of that leave, I got a phone call from my sergeant asking, what are you doing? I was like, oh, look, Sarge, I was trying to take this time to figure it out. And he said, well, there's a trip to Afghanistan, and we want you to be on it after you leave. And I was like, shit, like, I'm in, like, no need to think about this. And, we all understand we want to go on deployments and do these things and do the combat side of things as a combat role. So I was immediately jumping on. The way I explain it to a lot of civvies is being on a sports team, being, training, but sitting on the bench and never getting any game time, and that's sort of the analogy I use. But so I went on my leave and then came back, and then we got sent out to a beautiful place called Woomera, and I don't know who these guys are, just stole it from Google, so if you're in the crowd, thank you. I've used it many, many times. Woomera is a great place to train, very, very similar environment to Afghanistan, minus the mountains and people shooting at you. So it is a great place to train. We trained in the high-risk search, looking forward and always being out in front. And as much as the infantry boys don't like to hear that, we were the tip of the spear. But the other opportunity that I got before this training exercise was to become a combat first aider. We're learning how to do combat injuries, tourniquets, IV, sucking chest wounds, morphine, all that sort of stuff. So a very interesting time. And in the pre-deployment training, we're doing, kangaroo carcass first aid and pig's legs and things like that. It was really, really intense. And then at the time, I'm not sure if it is anymore, we were doing, with Care Flight, doing sort of combat first aid under fire and under sort of BNS and all that sort of stuff. So it was a great course, and I thoroughly recommend anyone who ever gets the opportunity to do the combat first aid course to jump in and do it. We integrated with our battle group, the 3RER, which they just had their wings taken off them, so they were a little bit angry. And they moved up to Townsville, another reason to be angry. It was interesting because it was the first time I think that 3RER had sort of integrated properly on a battle group, in a battle group, to go on to Afghanistan with engineers sort of calling the shots. And it was a lot of teething. There was a lot of sort of toing and froing about who was in charge and why the engineers get to call the shots on the movement and where we go and all that sort of thing. So bit of teething, but that's why we roll out and do our pre-deployment training and had that opportunity. So good 11 months worth of training, specific high-risk search training, and all the first aid and all the other comms and all that sort of other stuff that goes into it. So it was very intense and spending a lot of time away from home. And on the 12th of June 2012, exactly 6 years to the date that I enlisted, I was deployed to Afghanistan. And as we get told, when we head into a combat area, we get told there's IEDs and gunfights and, all the stories that I'd had from my mates that went on MTF2, and then the guys that actually were on deployment with, some of them were from MTF1. It was a pretty hairy place, but when we got there, for my team, we didn't see any gunfights. We were, it was a beautiful country. It was pretty dry and desolate and, very mountainous, but in the valleys there's these big green veins of life where the rivers flow, the kids go to school, people go to work, and the crops grow. And as we know, the summer over there is the fighting season because the insurgents are using the foliage on the trees for their concealment. And we were told that there was going to be gunfights and whatnot, and that wasn't necessarily the case. And whilst we were there, we were working pretty hard, long hours. It's very high, it's very hot. Carrying probably 20, 30 kilos worth of kit sometimes with very small amounts of water and food. So really working on that resilience piece, which was nice. But at the same time, having a job to do both for our battle group, but also for the people of Afghanistan. When we were there, we were obviously looking for IEDs, but the best thing to do is to find the IED before it actually becomes an IED. So finding the weapons, finding the RPGs and the recoilless rifle rounds, finding the components that make up an IED. And as you can see in this photo, it's everything. It's a broken down TV, it's a broken down car, it's door handles, it's anything and everything that they can sort of put together. And they're not dumb people, they know what they're doing. They know how to make these things, and they're probably smarter than I am in this regard. So although we're trained in how to find these things, how to identify them, but actually putting them together can be somewhat of a skill. And this is the funnest part, because this is taking the capability of the enemy away. When we can do this, they no longer can be fighters. They no longer can be the Taliban. They no longer can be Al-Qaeda. They just go back to being farmers and teachers and everything else. So obviously in that statement as well, we don't actually know who our enemy is, and it's always difficult. But this is the funnest part. So once you find one, you generally find more and more and more, and that was sort of what we were doing the whole time for the first 3 months. We never really found any IEDs. There was certain contacts off in the distance that we weren't a part of, but would like to claim that we were, and all that sort of thing. But at the same time, it was a lot of search, a lot of clearance patrols, and integrating in with different combat teams around Afghanistan, because that was part of our role there, as sort of like this get put out to the other units and that. So about 3 months into our deployment, we got wind of a very large clearance operation happening up in the Kazuruzgan area. As you can see here, this is the other search that we do, a route patrol. You can see that there's no way else around that hill other than driving along the road with the Bushmasters. So we've actually stopped here to let the Afghans who were trailing behind us to change a wheel on their Humvee. And this was the first time we got shot at. So an RPG round landed in between the Bushmaster you can see and the Bushmaster that the photo's taken from. We just swapped out to rest us and the other engineer team had been put out in front. It looks like old mate's taken a photo or a selfie or something like that. So they got a bit of a surprise when the RPG came down, and obviously there's 50 cals lining up the hill, and nothing else really happened. And it was sort of a weird situation, because of our remoteness. We were very, very remote at this point, but they're very opportunistic, the insurgents. Heading out to Kazuruzgan, we went into Patrol Base Anaconda. It was currently occupied by some Special Forces, Green Berets, and they had been in a contact pretty much every time they left the base. And being an engineer, we're looking at the ground and kicking rocks is not that comforting, knowing that every time these guys are going out, they're getting in contacts, running out of ammunition from their dune buggies and quad bike mini guns. It's not a very nice feeling. But we got the opportunity to sort of see how they were operating, see what they were doing. But at the time, the Americans were having a lot of green on blues around the whole of Afghanistan, and they had put down a blanket quiet period. So there was no patrols being conducted for the 2 or 3 days that we were about to head out to. And that was one of the issues that were sort of culminated in the risks that we were taking, because we had that obligation to go and help the people and help the Afghan security forces implement themselves in the strategic sort of area where we were going. So we were tasked with a 5-day patrol to re-establish an unoccupied checkpoint. What I mean by that, the checkpoint had been overtaken by the Taliban, and they'd placed in a lot of IEDs and whatnot, so we were heading out into that. So obviously, as I said before, the danger really wasn't there for us until we got on this deployment, and that was something that this mission, and that was something that we all made our little spider senses tickle a bit. And sure enough, it wasn't long until we got the opportunity to see and find our first IED in that process and that search process. So you can see there in the foreground, there's a blown up Hilux ute, standard issue of the Afghan police force. Unfortunately, they would have all passed away in that blast. But obviously, the obvious thing there is the explosion, and we're walking along not really knowing what's in front of us, searching along, and then we find something, and the process of that is somewhat of an interesting process. You get your metal detector hit, and you get down on your guts and start feeling around the dirt and touching the ID and feeling it and getting a good ID, and then you step back, mark it out, take a photo and move back to the vehicle, and you call up the EOD guys that get paid more than us to deal with it, which I think is a little bit of a wrong way around, because we don't know where they are. But anyway, that's a H&R issue. It took a long time. There was only one EOD team where we were. The combat team had a lot of other patrols happening at the time, and they were also finding devices, so the QOF was in and out of the base. And we could wait anywhere up to 2 hours to get the EOD team out to us, which was sometimes a bit of a long wait, especially when there was word that we were going to get shot at when we passed this hill. You can sort of see the hill and kind of in the distance there, and you know, knowing that there's a lot of insurgents around in the area, and actually later on that night when we're sort of chilling out in our shell scrapes, the infantry guys who had just been sucking aircon and Gatorade in the back of the Bushmasters, should have been infantrymen, but they got to, you know, do the guard duty because our lieutenant, our patrol commander, was obviously aware that we were working pretty hard and very focused and very difficult. They observed, you know, I think it was 15, 20 fighting vans full of fighting-age males leaving the area. So they obviously didn't want to fight us, which is nice to know. But you know, having that intel was pretty sort of sketchy, in my opinion. Moving into an area with the firepower that we had, we were sort of felt a little bit outgunned and outmanned. But at the same time, they didn't want to fight us, which, you know, it goes to show that the Bushmaster is not just a great vehicle, but also an intimidating one. My brick, I think it was a Corporal Livesay on the far end there, and then Ryan Wirtz, myself, and then Pitch. Pitch is only 19. I think that probably some of you in here will be about that young. I'm the eldest in the squad at 24, so I'd been in the army 6 years. Livo had just been 5 years, and then Ryan was about 3 years. So we're a pretty junior sort of team. We'd not been to Afghanistan before, so having our culmination of our team and our knowledge and our skill set together, we made a pretty good team overall. On the third day, we finally made our way towards the checkpoint up. I should go back one. The checkpoint's actually up on the top, on the right-hand side, on top of that feature there. You can kind of see a track going off to the right-hand side. It's a bit hard to see. This is the track, and you can see up ahead myself searching in front, and there's a very large boulder blocking the road, and the boulder itself was huge. Like, we couldn't move it by hand. We couldn't even tie a winch around it and pull it off. It was too big. So we had to find another way around, and we eventually got on top of the checkpoint. We saw, the damage. There was a lot of, HESCO baskets being cut out the bottom, all the sandbags being pushed over, and the insurgents aren't stupid. They threw a lot of metal all over the ground, lots of little bits of wire and little Coke can tabs and their rubbish. And the actual ground itself was not like your usual ground. It was granite, which was broken up. So our density difference search device wouldn't really work that well. It was very difficult earth to work in. And on top of working at 3,500 metres above sea level and 45 degrees with 20 kilos worth of kit, working 14 hours, doing about 4,000 squats a day does take its toll. And on the fourth day, we implemented in the morning. Early in the morning, we implemented the ANA into their position so they could provide overwatch and security for us. And then we got approval to explosively remove that large boulder. And as an engineer, we don't really get to play with much bang, but when we do, we get pretty excited. And I was not that excited. It takes ages to set up, and it's all over in about a heartbeat. So I was not really interested, and I wasn't really paying attention. And we'd already searched along the path, and I was sitting on a rock on the right-hand photo. So just to give a little bit of context and location, these two paths, as the right one goes around the corner to the left, it actually joins up where that rock is on the photo on the left photo. So just they join up. So I've gone to a rock on the right-hand photo, and I'm sitting there, and my mate Pitch comes over to me, and he's like, "What are you doing, you idiot?" I was like, "Oh, I thought it was this one. It was blocking this track and blah blah blah." And he's like, "No, it's the other one." I was like, "Oh, okay, cool." So I've packed up my metal detector, and I'm walking along. Pitch has stopped for some reason, as we all do in the army, like to throw rocks at things. He's throwing rocks down the hill, and about 10, 15 metres behind me, and then the separation that we get told about to mitigate that risk of a blast injury injuring more people than it needs to. We had that separation, and I'm walking along. Pitch is behind me, and I've got my rifle at the trail, and then all of a sudden, I'm like laying on the flat of my back, looking up at the sky. It's 11 o'clock in the morning. Bright blue sky, and it's black. It's dark, it's dusty, it's incredibly quiet. And as the rocks and debris sort of start falling, dissipate, and I can see the sky, I'm dazed and confused about why and what the hell has just happened. I get up on my elbows and I immediately knew what had happened. I could see my metal detector was obliterated all over the place. My rifle was snapped in half and sent off into the HESCO baskets to the right. I could see the blast crater next to me. I could see the blood spraying out of my legs like a fire hose. And that's when the pain hit me, like a freight train. And it wasn't just my legs that were sore. It was my ears, my tongue, my hands, my back, my ass. Everything about my body was under attack. And really hard to explain it, because a lot of people think that the pain, that traumatic event, you don't get any pain. But for me, in my situation, it was the case. And I explain it as like being crushed and set on fire and being stabbed all at the same time. And I've probably not had any of those things, but at the same time, it's, let the imagination develop and think about that. And it was very hard to breathe in that situation, obviously with the dust as well. I was a combat first aider. I grabbed my right leg, trying to stop the bleeding, put my hand into a wound that I could touch my femur bone. I could see that my left leg was spraying a lot more blood than my right, so I grabbed that leg. It's like, shit, I need a tourniquet here. So unwrapped the tourniquet, looped it over, tried to loop it over my leg and couldn't, because every time I got off my elbows, I kept falling backwards. And I could hear Pitch screaming. He had a slight concussion, actually probably a bad concussion, perforated eardrums, couldn't really hear me well. He was swearing a lot, and rightly so. And I yelled at him, swore at him to come over and put my tourniquets on. And through his bravery, he's the one who should have known not to come into the area because that an IED that we'd searched through had gone off, and now we need to search in. But he knew I was in trouble, and so did I. And I was yelling at him, and through his bravery and courage, he came running in to my side, applied the first tourniquet on the right leg, another one on the left. And that's when the rest of the patrol got to me, or the engineer patrol. And I want you to put yourself in their shoes. 20 seconds ago, their mate, their healthy, active mate, was just walking towards them, and all of a sudden he's lying, potentially going to die on the ground. And the trauma that I was going through laying on the ground there was now becoming their trauma. It was rippling through all around my friends, colleagues, associates, family. My mum about to get the knock on the door to say their son had been severely injured. My dad getting the phone call because he was in the mines at the time. My girlfriend, all these people were now being affected, and I'm just one person, let alone the families of my mates that are there with me. It was an interesting thing to think about, the ripples of the effects of trauma. I was being a pain in the ass, making sure the tourniquets are done up tight and the bandages. I could feel myself going into shock. I knew that I lost a lot of blood and I needed an IV, so I'm trying to talk the guys through that, trying to prime the line and all that sort of thing. And luckily enough, one of the infantry guys, Lance Cripple Court, I think he's a sergeant now. He from 3RA, he came in and took over that process because the boys obviously had not done that, and finding a vein and as someone who's going into shock is very, very difficult because there's no veins really available. He's come in, taken over that, and the boys then stand up. They're sort of feeling helpless. They don't know what to do. Oh, they're like, what should we do? What should we do? I was like, fuck, some morphine, I'll be right, eh? So trying to talk them through that. It was before we were giving EpiPens or anything like that, so you had to draw it up and then change the needle over and then administer it. And they're like, oh, where do you want it? Where do you want it? I said, fucking stab me. So, just got me in the arm and gave me a good hit. And that was, something I remember quite as an amusing point of it all. And as I said, I'm checking the bandages. They kept sitting up and they kept pushing me back down and, being a pain in the ass. And unbeknown to me, my left arm is severely injured. I've got heaps of broken bones. I've got blast burns all across my arm, my fingers, splinters and stuff like that. Apparently the IED was in a wooden box for some reason, and the wood came up into my fingers, and lacerated tendons. So I've got like an ET finger now, but it's it's called a mallet finger, but I don't have the tendon on the top. So it's always interesting when I'm pointing at people. It's like over there, but at the same time, and the actions on that day of what those people did for me and those mates, it's the reason why I'm able to stand here today and tell my story. And they picked me up and put me onto the stretcher, and the RSM's doing their RSM thing and yelling at people for wearing non-issued boots, and I was one of those people, and just had to buy brand new Merrill boots and blew them up. So I was like, fuck, new boots. Wasted my money. Not that the issued part made any difference, but anyway, having a joke about these things, and the boys were like, oh man, you're a lucky bastard, you get out of here earlier, and I was like, yeah, thanks guys, but at the same time, having that dark humour, having that laugh to get through that traumatic event, whether it be at the cost of something. I think we're innately aware of our Anzac traditions, and having a laugh and some banter in those dark situations bonds people together to get through that traumatic moment. And they carried me along to where the vehicles were in a harbour, and it's nice to not have to explain what that is. And they're carrying me along, and every step of the way I feel like I'm going to fall off it, and I'm saying, don't you drop me, don't you drop me. And I could see, some of the guys were crying as they were carrying the stretcher, and I could see and feel the hurt that they were also feeling, that trauma. And I said to them, boys, I'll be fine. I know I'll go to the Paralympics or something like that. And I thought, all right, that's a bit weird, but I said, it won't be in the green and gold, though, it'll be in the black and white. And then I thought, all right, I suppose you can walk to the chopper then. So, in that moment, using that humour and having a laugh, and we're all having a giggle, and they carry me along and lay me down next to the vehicles, and that's when the waiting began. And I knew that the longer that chopper would take, the closer I would come to death. And that's when I thought I was going to die. And it was in that moment where it was like utter helplessness. No one else could do any more first aid to me. We'd done everything that we'd been trained to do. We'd started writing, how much morphine and, my blood pressure and time and all that sort of stuff on the body with a permanent marker on my forehead. And everything was done, and now all we had to do was wait. And that's when I knew this is it. So I pulled my mate Pitch in again, and remembering he's a 19-year-old kid, he's only been in the army like 20 minutes, and I said, mate, like, you don't have to go onto my laptop and go on and hopefully delete a file, but at the same time, don't delete the one with my letters to my family. Letters to say that I wasn't coming home, death letters. And I was the only one who ironically wrote these letters in my team, but whether that's irony or coincidence, it's just, I wrote these letters to say that I wasn't coming home. And having to pass that burden on to him was the hardest thing that I've ever had to do in my life, knowing that my final wishes were for him to do that. And that was really, really difficult. And there's people around that's crying, I'm crying, and I'm saying I don't want to die and all that sort of stuff. And those words there I kind of regret saying, because that has more of a lasting effect than actually the blood and the gore, I think, in my mind, because of their helplessness and my helplessness in that moment. Not to say that you shouldn't do that, because that's what happens, but it's just something to think about. But after having to go through all that, the choppers, finally show up. The US choppers with Australian Special Forces medics in them. There's our harbour. I've been sort of stripped naked, as you do, check the wounds for the back and all that sort of thing. Chopper comes down, kicks up a shitload of dust, and sandblasts me. They pick me up, slide me into the stretcher. There's no goodbye, no nothing. I recently listened to a podcast that Cordy did, and he was saying that when he went up to the loadmaster, the loadmasters punched him in the face or in the throat or something because he thought he was jumping on the chopper, and the loadmaster's obviously protecting his airframe. And I didn't know that was happening, obviously. He's just trying to hand over the first aid card, anyway. But at the same time, it was just an interesting thing to think about, in those situations, that communication is really key, but anyone who's been around a chopper knows you can't hear shit. So slid in, closed the door, and an interesting thing happened. I felt I was in the middle of the stretchers, nice and even, and I felt like my legs were through the door. My brain had not obviously come to terms with what had happened, and it felt like my legs were halfway through the door. So I grabbed the top of the stretcher, pulled myself up, and then just had a drink of water and was like, shit, I'm going to need surgery. I probably should start fasting. So a bit of a strange thing to think about, but the things that go through your mind. And then I had a bit of a cry and sort of went unconscious in the chopper. So that's sort of how close, a signal of how close I was. And came to, and I punched the 3RR RSM in the chest, which is my claim to fame, as I came to for some reason. And in and out of consciousness, sort of moving from the chopper into the trauma bay, and then I was put to sleep for, 15 hours, different surgery, went to Kandahar and woke up in Bagram Air Base up near Kabul, and an Australian Air Force nurse was there, and I was loaded onto a C-17, a US plane heading to Germany, Landstuhl Hospital and Ramstein Air Base. This is just from Google, but because I didn't have my phone on me or my camera or anything like that. But funnily enough, though, I had an Olympus Tough camera like in this pocket here, and it survived. So, which is pretty amazing. But never got to keep it. On this plane was a really eye-opening experience. I was the only non-American on that flight. On my side, I was down one side, there was double bunks, and we were all laying wounded. On the other side, it was seated wounded, and I thought I was pretty banged up. I was probably maybe gold star for worst day. But there was two guys up the front of the plane having surgery on the flight, and they were actively dying. And it was eye-opening because I was a part of Afghanistan. I was there, and I had no idea this was going on. This was something that was completely foreign. I think I don't know whether it was intentionally kept from us, but at the same time, think about the people back here that are opposing the war. They don't even know this is going on. Like this is crazy. And I thought Americans weren't even out on patrols, but what was going on in Afghanistan was a lot bigger than what I knew. And we were in Uruzgan province, and we went comparatively. We didn't have Kandahar or Helmand, all those more difficult provinces. I was flown to Landstuhl, treated for wounds and all that sort of thing, and made ready to fly home, and I got to fly home on first class, but I don't recommend stepping on an IED to get an upgrade. But at the same time, made very comfortable with the transition team, and got to meet Rachel, my girlfriend, now my wife, at the plane door, and this photo here is a couple of weeks after that reunion, and it was a difficult reunion because I felt like I'd let her down. I'd changed ultimately and drastically the course of our lives and where we were going and what we were going to do. And this photo I leave in because this photo, about 5 minutes after it, I had a massive breakdown. It was the first time I was able to move myself from the bed onto the wheelchair. It was the first time by myself. Having the nurses and the wardies to do everything for me was great, but when you actually have to be independent, it's a really sinking feeling to actually, this is my reality, and I'm now a disabled person. I'm now a person that requires prosthetics, wheelchairs, driving modification, shower chairs, just to have a normal life. And that was something that was very difficult for me, a 24-year-old fit, healthy guy. All that to me was now taken away, and now I was sort of wheelchair bound and not understanding about what the opportunities were. And that's where Rachel came in, and we went off to physio, and she said, I think you should set goals, thinking about who you are and where you're going, what you're going to do with yourself, and try and aim for something, have something to look forward to, something to progress towards, to push yourself, and find that opportunity within what your situation is. And trying to be optimistic with the situation is obviously difficult, but at the same time, it's trying to look for what you can do rather than what you can't, and what you do have rather than what you don't. And I went off to physio. It started like 3 minutes, and then by the time of end of hospital, I was doing about 9 to 10 hours a day. I'd set the goal to be upstanding for when the guys got home from Afghanistan, and I was sort of lying to them. I may have not been as discreet as I could have been to surprise them. I was, saying, it's surgery, more surgery, infections, it's not going well, blah, blah, blah. And, unbeknown to them, I'm down in Sydney trying to get new legs. And, it was a process. I wasn't going to say it was easy. There was a lot of nerve issues and whatnot, bearing weight, especially through my left leg. It was through the tibia. So I'm below the knee amputee on my left side and above the knee amputee on my right side, and that's why my legs are different, sort of different components and look different. So I've got my femur on my right side, so I bear weight the same place you do, and that's sort of the biomechanics of it all. But the nerve issue on the left side, because it's through the tibia, it's not where you're meant to bear weight. I had a lot of issues there, but managed to be upstanding. Welcomed the guys home from the plane, which was an amazing moment, and then I got the opportunity to march in the Welcome Home Parade, and I'm at the back of the parade and everyone else has marched away. But it's a great sense of closure for me, and sense of time in the army's now come to an end. I could no longer be a combat engineer. I was who was I, and what was I going to become? But always those thoughts kept creeping in. What if I'd found that IED that I missed 3 months prior? What if that someone else stepped on it, which I think was the worst case scenario in my mind because I missed it? What if that chopper had taken extra 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes even longer? We were a long way out, probably just out beyond that golden hour. So having all these thoughts coming into my mind, it was obviously learning and coming to terms with what had happened, but it was more about what was next. What can I do next? What's the opportunity? And I decided that sport, something that was familiar for me, something that was trying to get myself outside, to be me again, which was really important, to do things that I was comfortable with. So I got involved with the Invictus Games and veteran sport, and it was amazing to see. Nicole talked about we can't be what we can't see, and having that opportunity to see what was possible with people who had been through the same situation as me, almost exactly, was really it was amazing. It was inspirational, and we like to, as a Paralympian now, we start to hate the word inspiration because we get used in an interesting way. They call it inspiration porn, and we're fronted out to inspire people. But when you see someone like you doing things that you didn't think were possible, that's inspirational in my mind, regardless of who you are and what you're doing. Invictus was an amazing moment. You guys would all know about that, and having the opportunity to represent Australia and your team in that way is pretty cool, with people who've been through similar situations. And I got involved with Mates for Mates. I'm pretty sure they've got a centre up here, but this was back in 2013. We kayaked from Sydney to Brisbane, just take the flights heaps easier. Took us 3 weeks. I did it with my father, but again, coming together with like-minded people who'd been through similar situations was a pretty amazing feeling to achieve that. Physically, that was really easy. Mentally, it was very difficult. The grinding. We're doing like 5Ks an hour, which is pretty slow. But we got there in the end, and coming in and finishing it and completing it with people is what I'm trying to highlight here. Is like coming together to achieve things is what we do in the army. We're to achieve our mission. And to have that opportunity to do it together and feel success is very important for recovery and rehabilitation as well. Going into kayaking was something that I did as a kid, and I wanted to do a sport that I really enjoyed growing up, and that was something that I sort of gravitated towards. And I tried swimming, didn't really like looking at a black line all my life. Archery was good, but it was very skill, finesse-based. Wanted something I could apply myself with, physical attributes, and paddling was something that was coming in new for the Rio Paralympic Games, and initially, it went really well for me. I jumped in the boat, and as Charlie said in my intro, 18 months in, stood on top of the podium in Moscow and had world champion medal around my neck. And then they decided to change the boat from the outrigger canoe, which is this one, to the kayak, and as you can see, that went real well. But it's a great sort of analogy. We have to swim before we can go fast, and anyone who's ever been in a sprint kayak before knows that these things are very unforgiving. It was, I love the saying is persistence is a great substitute for talent, and if you persist, I've spent a lot of time swimming, a lot of time emptying out my boat. This is actually at World Championships, but I don't really have a training photo of that. And having that opportunity to be pushed along by the team around me, which is really important. And I think, how do we become high performance? It's generally the team around us. And the team around us make it all happen. They bring the boats along, they book the travel, they provide the physiology and the biomechanics. And these guys can inflict a lot of pain on people in their sessions and things like that. But this is the brains behind the on-water coaching staff and the coaching staff. And that's how we elevate with our team around us, our specializations of these people to bring along to produce an athlete. And I'm just one athlete. And as you can see, there's probably 10 people all supporting me and all sort of pushing along in their own goals and ambitions that make it possible to be a high-performance athlete. And, what does a day look like? A day can be, generally most the same. It's very, very monotonous, very routine, and I like that, and that's something I think the military instills in us, having that routine, having that process of achieving the same tasks but enhancing them every day. But it's also something that gets very fatiguing, and to try and be better than you were the day before, day on, day out, is very, very difficult. And this is sort of a snapshot of a day. But how does that look over our entire year? Now, this is going to confuse the hell out of you, but there's a lot of data in here, but each red dot is one session, one day, which you saw before. The form is obviously how well I'm going to do, and it's all done off our watches, all done off our GPS systems. The fatigue, you can see there, it goes up, that fatigue. You can see this is just an overlay that I've put on. You can see what time of year that I'm actually doing what, and when the power and the sprint, as you can see, that pink line is right up at the end of that power and sprint, and then you've got a taper, which is really important. Use that break, use that recovery, use that time, and then you can execute to the best of your ability. You can see the orange goes way up when the pink goes way down. The fitness should, tracks way, way, way up. As you can see there, it dips right off, and I haven't done anything since Tokyo, so it's probably even lower than that now. So, but at the same time, you can see sort of over a whole year, it's a pretty confusing graph. But we can take all that data, we can calculate it all, and make it all produce the performance in which we're trying to do. And in Rio, I'm going to speed up my slides now because I'm getting the hurry along. So in Rio, it was an amazing feeling to get to that line, to say that I'd get to the Paralympic Games and achieve it was an amazing feeling. And when I crossed that line, it wasn't a feeling of success. It wasn't a feeling of joy, which I expected. It was a feeling of absolute and utter relief. Like I said, I set those goals and I was achieving them, not just for me, but the people that came along that journey with me, all those staff, all my friends, all my family, all my mates in the army, all those people that helped save my life and got me to where I was now. And having that moment on the podium was pretty cool because that's when I actually felt like I'd succeeded. And funny enough, the guy from GB, he's another combat engineer, bilateral amputee. The guy in the red, Marcus Swoboda, he was injured in a farming incident when he was younger, but very, very similarly, similar disabilities up there, which is kind of a rare thing within the Paralympics. But this was definitely my proudest moment, and I should point out that I am wearing the green and gold, although looking like a convict here, which is quite ironic. Carrying the Australian flag in the closing ceremony was by far the proudest moment that I've had to represent something. The Paralympic Games was founded off wounded soldiers' sport and veterans, sport, getting back into it, and now it's culminated in this moment for me, and it was an amazing feeling. Since then, got to hang out with Prince Harry, which is all right, and then got married, continued on my winning ways and was looking real good for Tokyo. You beauty, this is going to be awesome. Expectation meets reality. COVID kicks in, and we all know what happened there, and the postponement. And I was very demotivated and not really aware of how I was going to go, and I was very pessimistic about it all, not knowing that the games were actually going to happen. As I said, I didn't think they were going to happen, and expectation meets reality. I'm sitting at home drinking wine, playing Lego. So, but it's training through the whole thing. So it was a bit of a weird, awkward situation, but. Goals are important then because we reminded ourselves what we're trying to do, who we're trying to be, and pushing towards something. And finally getting to line up in last year, we got told that it was going to be like 40 degrees and 90% humidity, which is just, you love it up here, so I'm sure you're aware of it. But it was pissing down, 17 degrees, cold. All the tropical nations are all, in big thermals and jackets on the water, and executing the perfect race was what happened for me, and I was, had that extra time to push myself and expand on the areas which my weaknesses, and I think, COVID gave us a unique opportunity to take a bit more time and work on the finer details, and having that and lining up and executing and feeling like I'd done or won something or achieved something more for myself and more for my cementing that I could do it rather than maybe as a fluke on the first time, but to win twice is pretty difficult, and having, again, all that team that supported me along the way, and that's what makes the high performance nature, is the team that pushes us along. So what next? What next is right now. I'm looking towards the Paris qualifying, which is next year. The slide takes ages, so I'll just speed it up. Over the next sort of 12 months, it's overseas, it's lots of training, it's in between all those, that one day you saw before, the same slide, each day in there is each sort of part all lines up towards this culmination of hopefully standing on the podium and working towards that. And it's an amazing feeling. And getting the opportunity to actually have our friends and family there in Paris is going to be an amazing feeling, and hopefully we can actually do that without a pandemic affecting it this time. And since being injured in Afghanistan, I've been given a new perspective on life, and whether that is becoming a disabled person or winning a silver medal when you work so hard to get gold. All of these things have made me the person I am today. And I often get asked, would I go back and change what happened to me in Afghanistan? And I should absolutely not. It's allowed me to pursue a direction, make friends, have opportunities that I would never have had otherwise. And that's pretty much why it is a triumph over tragedy. So thank you very much.
Question from the Cove Live audience. It's from Captain Hugo Tuvey, Headquarters 4Com in Sydney. Hugo says, Curtis, it's always inspiring and great listening to your inspiring story. After all you have been through, how has this equipped you in facing new challenges in your life?
I know Hugo quite well, and we've done a few things together, so he's probably heard me speak about 5 times. So he's always good at getting a question to me. The Army equips us with the goal-orientated mindset to come together in order to achieve. And I didn't realise this. I was not a goal-orientated person before I got injured, and I might have been, but it's subsequent to other people's goals and ambitions. And it was something that was highlighted to me when I was sitting in that wheelchair, realising that it was me who had to bring myself out of that corner, me who had to bring myself emotionally out of that moment of absolute despair, and trying to come to terms with who I was and what the opportunities ahead of me is really important. And I said it in my talk as think about what you can do rather than what you can't, and think about what you do have rather than what you don't. And if you start to break down into those little sort of parts to see things, you might actually see another opportunity, and they lead on to another. One door closes, another door opens is what I'm trying to say. And having that opportunity to get together with my mates and to connect with them and talk about what we've been through is a nice opportunity to see where we can go next as well.
Thanks, Curtis. We have another question from the Cove, from Warrant Officer Class 1 Mark Grigg, Headquarters 4Com in Sydney. Curtis, how did your time in Army help prepare you mentally and physically to be an elite sportsman?
I think the routine is much as we maybe don't like getting up in 6 in the morning and doing PT or standing to or anything like that. That routine cements, a mindset that allows you to endure a little bit more and understand when there's some differences in your day. So having that routine, having that opportunity to set out your day, know what you're doing, knowing what your task is, knowing your responsibilities and roles down to a T, it equipped me really well for life as an athlete, but also the perseverance to persist when my talent wasn't high enough to achieve as well was definitely something that helped me from my time in the military.
Thanks, Curtis. We have a question from Aaron Pabst, 1CR. In spite of the difficult search conditions, I imagine your mates may have taken on blame for your injury. Was that a conversation that they had with you? And if so, how did you manage that?
Yeah, it's a good question. Ultimately, I think I'm to blame, but at the same time, the most of the blame is on the insurgents. They're the ones who were doing that. They were the ones that are planting these indiscriminate devices in order to wage war, and it is such a disgusting way. And I think, having that mindset and opinion and perspective of it all, it allows me to process that personally, firstly, and then moving on to my mates that were there. And Livo, the brick commander, he felt very responsible and still struggles with that process and having not clear instructions, because as we get fatigued, communication breaks down, but at the same time having that blame on himself was very difficult for him to come to terms with. And it was really important, and it still is to this day, to keep connecting, to have chats, have those hard chats, have a cry, have a process that makes you feel that you can talk. And I think that's the difficult thing is, as young males, we tend to think that we're nice and macho and strong and things like that. But there's no harm in having a chat and having a cry about something that was as traumatic as that. And I think having that time to process it, and a lot of people were pissed off after Afghanistan fell to the Taliban. And I think we can all sit here today, and the people who have been to Afghanistan and contributed to that deployment and that area felt like we contributed in a positive manner. And just the fact that it fell to the Taliban was not a surprising to me. What was surprising was the speed in which it happened, and we'd put so much time into that. And then even still, with my mates around me, they felt that was a shit situation, but there was not much we could do. And that's the things we have to think about as athletes as well. You have to control the controllables and don't worry about the things you can't control. Or you can maybe have an effect later on, but that's something that we always need to maintain that perspective of control the controllables.
Some great points there, thank Curtis. Okay, for our last question, I've got one actually. So you touched on your support team and the links in with Mates for Mates. Is there any other external service organisations that you linked in and supported you throughout the time since your incident, such as Defence Member Family Services, formerly known as DCO, or Open Arms?
Yeah, it was when I was in hospital, I kind of got bombarded with it all, and that sometimes can be a good thing and a bad thing, and it needs to be controlled, which it became controlled after we realised how many people wanted to talk to me. But in that, it's nice knowing that they were there. That was really nice to have that opportunity or that option for me to talk to them, to have a talk, to discuss what they provide, and to discuss what I may need in the future. And especially with the DVA, as much as a bad rep that they get, they've really been amazing for me. There's been a lot of, we had a really great on-base advisor in Enoggera Barracks when I was there. And having that guy right there was really important to me to understand what I was eligible for. And a lot of people get out of the military and then forget that they've dotted their I's and crossed their T's. And not filled out the form, and every time something happens, make sure you're getting that paperwork done. But the RSL has always been there as well. In the background, they've supported me, and they've supported the Mates to Mates, which has in turn supported me. And they're an amazing organisation that's reaching much farther than just Queensland. They're all the way up here and down and around across Australia. So they're always there, and we're seeing the RSL now develop and evolve into something that is more of an open environment for the younger veterans to come through and be welcome there, which I think is a great sort of evolvement and development for us as young diggers and young soldiers, and have that opportunity to be around community, because I think that's really important to have people that have been around you. Like I said in my talk, you can't be what you can't see, and having the opportunity to be around people that have been through it before and had difficult situations is really important. So, thank you.
Thank you, Curtis. I must say your insight and forward thinking at the time of the incident was quite remarkable to hear. And so thank you for sharing all of that, and of course all that personal journey that you've been on. Ladies and gentlemen, can you put your hands together for Curtis McGrath?